Though I have spoken on suffering, I have never done this. It's a really loaded topic. The undeserved tragedy. Due to the terrible second wave, the moment we walk on the roads or sit near our windows, we can hear sirens of the ambulance passing by continuously. And we wonder who is going to count this last breath. Our heart gets burdened. Should we sit idle at home to win our fight to stay alive? Or should we run to some island where no other human being is there? What are we supposed to do? Recently, one of my friends lost her husband just after 2 years of their marriage to COVID. Her grief was overwhelming. I could feel her literally undergoing all the 5 stages of grief that was put forth by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1969. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Initially, she was in the denial phase. And then she could not believe that this was happening to her. When the doctors called her to hospital to tell her that her husband is no more, she could not accept it. She was telling the doctors that he was not dead and they have not properly checked and so on. She could not believe that it was happening to her. Then she went into an anger stage. She was so angry at the situation, especially God, who did not listen to her. And then she entered into a depression phase after her relatives left. When her relatives was there, she was okay. And then she felt sad when the times they were together, especially during the evenings or on Sundays. And now 2 months over, she's slowly trying to adjust. Um, I won't say she is moving on, but she is moving forward with her tragic memories and happy memories with him, with the additional burden to find a job for her. While some, like my friend, experience grief due to the loss of loved ones, many are experiencing anticipating grief, where they are aware that death is somewhere nearby. It's a near possibility. They experience increased irritability, bitterness, detachment, inability to experience joy. They are often in a state of hyper alertness, panicking whenever the phone rings or whenever they hear an ambulance or when they read the newspaper or the TV news and so on. This is mentally and physically exhausting and it disrupts our daily routines. This week, I came to know in my apartment that a 13-year-old girl jumped from the 12th floor and committed suicide. It's terrifying and it's heartbreaking. Going through this dark period of COVID-19 pandemic where death looms everywhere, many may be loaded with questions like, why this undeserved tragedy? Why is life unfair? How to make sense of all these senseless deaths? How to deal with this unfair, unjust world? Pain is real. It's also very private. It comes with the loss of what we consider significant or important and feel that we cannot live without that. The pain of losing something precious, fatal illness, personal betrayals, financial downfalls, the emptiness of the present, the shock of great change. Some of these will eventually come to pass in our lifespan. No one is immune. No matter what precautions you take, no matter how well you have put together your life, something will inevitably ruin it. Human life is fragile and subject to forces beyond our power to manage. The things, the dreams we lost, the expectation gone is ours and ours alone. People may say, go on, but going on for what? Pain cannot be erased. Pain cannot be tolerated. It cannot be ignored. It has to be faced head on. When such tragedy happens, the emotional reaction to a tragedy is called as grief. Griefs feel a lot like fear, the fear of growing old alone, the fear that the intense pain will never stop, the fear that we will never get anyone to hold our hands, the fear of forgetting the person we love. Remember the tsunami in December 2004 that killed 250,000 people? In Nagapatnam, a man was standing holding his little son when the water was coming. His son was holding on to him tightly and shouted, "Daddy, don't leave me go, don't let me go." But suddenly a big wave came and pulled him away. And he was shouting at that time, "Daddy, you let me go." Afterwards, that voice of that child, "Daddy, you let me go," made that dad a terrible person. He felt excruciating pain in his mind. Grief makes someone feel isolated, abandoned, terrified, damaged. But how long some people will grieve? How much they will grieve depends on your personality, coping styles, life experiences, faith, and nature of loss. Let me share my screen, the undeserved tragedy. This is one of the close-up view of tsunami damage. We can see only properties, but how many people are carried alive by that 1 second a huge wave comes and takes away millions of people. It's terrific. It's so sad. And a little virus takes away a lot of people with it. It is unimaginable. That is tragedy. What are the types of tragedy? There are two types. One is natural, the other one is moral. Natural, I would say, like that tsunami, the earthquake, the COVID deaths that we see around. Recently, when I became COVID positive, when I went to the hospital, I could see people panicking for bed, and people everywhere were crying out for bed, for oxygen cylinders. It was so tragic to stand there, to be in the emergency ward. It's so dangerous, so difficult when such natural disaster strikes us. And next is moral. Moral disaster or tragedy involves a perpetrator and a victim. This involves murder, rape, abuse, terrorist attack. The reason that about all the September 11 terrorist attack that killed so many people. Some planes came, and how many people were killed. And another one, sometimes carelessly we perpetrate. This death in Columbia Space Shuttle is one example for it. Kalpana Chawla is one of those astronauts who were killed. But why were they killed? When they were interrogating and working on whether regarding the re-entry, these people, this is one of the presentation that were presented to the leaders, to the NASA managers by the engineers. They said that can be a problem during re-entry, and they explained it. But the managers thought this will not affect. They took it easily. They thought this will never happen. And if you see this PPT, it's also not that so clearly significantly telling. If it is a danger, you should put it as red and all the colors that makes people to understand that there is something danger behind it. But when these engineers presented, they presented as a normal presentation. And the managers or the leaders never took it seriously. And finally, they lost so many precious lives. Many times we get into tragedy because of carelessness. So, types of traumatic events. Many of the tragedies are single events, like a motor vehicle accident, a rape, and sometimes it's a sequential stressor. A child was only 3 years old. She was abused continuously by her care provider, and later she became schizophrenic and she ended her life as a suicidal victim. Many domestic violence survivors would say how it is a tragedy, undeserved tragedy, that they suffer for not 1 year, 2 years, but decades. And many people are tortured in their own job. So these are some of the sequential stressors, and sometimes it's a one-time event. Whatever it is, pain is real. It's not illusionary. We feel it. People say everything is illusion sometimes, but it's real. There is no illusion in that. We feel it. So how, there are two questions at that time. How do we deal with it? And what is our worldview? You know, Bertrand Russell, he wrote in one of his essay, A Free Man's Worship, the life of a man is a long march through the night, surrounded by invisible foes, tortured by weariness and pain, towards a goal that few can hope to reach, and where none may tarry long. One by one, as they march, our comrades vanish from our sight, seized by the silent orders of omnipotent death. Very brief is the time in which we can help them, in which their happiness or misery is decided. Let us remember that they are fellow sufferers in the same darkness, actors in the same tragedy. Brief and powerless is man's life, on him and all his race, the slow, sure doom falls, pitiless and dark. Blind to good and evil, reckless of distraction, omnipotent matter rolls on its relentless way, for man condemned today to lose his dearest, tomorrow himself to pass through the gate of darkness. It remains only to cherish at the blow falls the lofty thoughts that ennoble his little day, disdaining the coward terrors of the slave of fate, to worship at the shrine that his own hands have built, undismayed by the empire of chance, to preserve a mind free from the phantom tyranny that rules his outward life. You know, this is a fatalistic view. For him, there is no supernatural powers behind this world. Everything came by blind chance. And the life of a man is just very brief and powerless. That is true. What Bertrand Russell said, that our life is powerless and brief, is true. But the other portion, whether it's really pitiless and dark and it's a long march through the night, surrounded by invisible foes, tortures, weariness and pain, is it true? Is it that no one is there to help us out? Or did we come to this planet Earth by chance? That is the question. When I wrote Beyond the Boundaries of Science, Exploring the Cosmic Storybook, I wanted to find out the very answer for this question. Whether I came back to this, whether I am here in this world by chance, or is there a supernatural intelligence behind it? And for me, all my research pointed towards the fact there is an intelligence. There is a design behind everything. When I looked at the DNA, when I looked at the beautiful little baby, it showed a design. You know, that's why Fred Hoyle says that some super intellect has monkeyed with physics, chemistry, and biology. Even Stephen Hawking says that when the universe started, the rate of expansion, if it would have been small by a little portion, the whole universe would have been crumbled. But what is it that breathes fire into that equation? What made that expansion so critical that even now that it is expanding at the same critical expansion rate? That is the way many of these atheistic scientists question. So is there a supernatural designer behind all it? Or are we supposed to follow Bertrand Russell philosophy? This question becomes very important when we go through tragedy. So these are the two questions that come to our mind. It can be intellectual, it can be existential. If you are undergoing the tragedy, it will become existential. How will I deal with that? How would I cope with this? And if you are undergoing, or if you're seeing someone undergoing tragedy, you will stand outside the problem and will look at the problem and ask why. Why it's happening? What approach should I take? Why this pain? Why this tragedy? Are all these tragedies due to the will of God, as some worldview says? Or is it due to our karma, as some other says? Or is everything a blind process with pitiless indifference, and a man's life is a long march tortured by weariness and pain, as Russell says? Or is it due to the desires of our life, like Gautama Buddha said? Gautama Buddha, when he looked at the pain, when he looked at the tragedy and the death, he got away from that. He looked at his wife and his son when he was born and just said bye, because he wanted to come out of his desires. Because desires are the root cause of our pain, he understood. But is it true? Can we stop loving the ones whom we love? For example, my friend has lost her husband. Can she stop loving him even after his death? Can she leave the desire? Can she stop the memories? It's impossible. Then what is the right worldview? How would I know the truth? How would I know the question? Is there a God who loves me? Is there a personal God who can speak to me, who can listen to my blabberings? Or am I everything going through just as an automaton, and whatever somebody has planned everything and I don't have any free will, it's just happening on its process? Or it's because of my sin which I have done so many janmas back, and so I have to just accept it? So these are the questions that come to our mind when we see such tragedies. Yes. Coping with traumatic tragedies, there can be wrong strategies, that there are right strategies. So let me put before you some of the wrong strategies and also the right strategies. The first one is denial. Some people deny it because they cannot take that agony in the heart. So they separate their mind from the agony in their heart. They deny the past and ignore their memories. And such ambivalence finally ends up in depression, helplessness, and a feeling of abandonment. They look like spiritualized automaton. They actually act as though everything is normal. They put on a smile, but inside that smile, there is a deep pain. And after some time, some triggers come up. One girl was telling that she had to undergo a great betrayal and she was forced out of her marriage. And every time she looks at some couple so happily walking on the road, she had to run back to her house and cry, because that was a grief trigger for her. She was not able to accept it because she tried to forget it and deny it and actually acted as though it never happened to her. And the next wrong strategy is delay. Some people will think that, okay, let me look at it after some time. They just try to see if time will heal their wounds. But I wanted to say time will never heal. Time may just keep it for some time away. But wounds that stay unresolved, unprocessed, remain deep in the spirit, that leads to despair. The another view is fatalistic view. As Russell said, the life of a man is a long march to the night, surrounded by invisible foes, tortured by weariness and pain, towards a goal that few can hope to reach. And finally, some people are so scared of everything. For example, one person has got into an accident, was scared to drive forever in his life. Have you heard of this Impala antelope? It can jump a height of 10 feet and it can jump a distance of 30 feet horizontally. And but you put just a 3 feet height wall, and you can keep so many of such antelopes before that wall, because the antelope will not jump unless it does not know where its feet will land. So such fear will make people to stay crippled all through their life. So it's very important that when someone undergoes traumatic tragedies, what sort of strategies they have to work on. So I wanted to tell that acknowledge the grief and express the pain of the loss. Face the feeling of grief and actively deal with it. Connect with others, some who can only relate to you. Sometimes even your close family member will never understand, and always they will be judgmental. Try to be away from them. One of the abuse victims said even her own church pastor could never understand why she had to be divorced. And she faced a severe trauma whenever she meets him because he used to be judgmental. It's very dangerous. Some people cannot understand others' pain because their life is so happy and they have never experienced someone like that in their life. So you should always connect with those who can relate to your pain. Join a support group or a community that has meaningful relationship. Plan ahead of grief triggers by talking to a therapist. It's better to have a therapist. In Deborah Rice movement, we have a lot of therapists and psychologists, and we freely do counseling through our website. People can contact us because this is the only reason. Many people have grief, unresolved pain, and it is always good to talk with some counselors who can understand, who can listen, and express your feeling in a creative way. You know, this actor, I am not getting his name, he actually in the World War, he fell down from his aircraft and he got a terrible scar on his face. But later, because of the scar, he became a famous actor. I think Jack Palance. So sometimes some of our pains can be used in a creative way. We should always look after our personal and physical health, because our body comes with us all the time. We should take care of our health. And finally, I wanted to say is the best tragedy is to bring the wounded heart to God. Every time when we bring our wounds and pains to some power higher than us, it's always a comfort. No, there is a God who also suffered like us. He was Jesus Christ. He came to this world and took up the cross. He understands why he took up the cross, because he wants to redeem the humanity and he wants to understand the pain. He does not want to be a distant one. And sometimes when we walk through the pain, we move from the abstract knowledge of God to a personal encounter with God. Many times people get the question, if God is really God, then he could have stopped it. Will God answer me in person? This question was asked by one man called Job, which is written in one of the oldest book in the Bible. It's a very wonderful story. You know, he lost everything. And finally, he was questioning, will God answer me personally? God did not answer him, but he showed the beautiful creation, the design, the fine design behind everything. And then he understood that some things are beyond his limited understanding, and he was blessed beyond measure. You know, next is, I wanted to deal in detail with this. How to support such a person who is undergoing undeserved tragedy. Listen to them. Listen as much as you can. One person was telling that her sister all the time comes and tells how she was widowed, how her husband left her. And finally, he got so bored and he stopped her from talking to him. But it was told to him that is the only way that she can come out. You know, your mother lost her child. And she said the best comfort what she had is the neighbor child one day came and sat in her laps and tightly held her, and she started crying. And you know, you listen to them, be with them, just be present when they grieve. Don't decide for them some course of action. And some people give well-intentioned but insensitive comments. You will be all right. You must be strong. This too will pass. I know how you feel. You cannot know how the others feel. Their pain is theirs. It's so private. For you, at least this happened. It could have been much worse in that accident. At least you had at least 1 year time together. He is now in a better place. It's all God's will. Everything happens for a reason. And the worst thing is move on. Don't give such advice to anyone. They cannot move on. How can they forget it and move on? They might have loved someone so much, and it is so difficult to forget and move on. Never give such advice. It's dangerous. Such advices are really dangerous, and it puts people into lot of pain. I have heard many people telling me directly, their well intentioned, their friends telling, move on. It's so difficult for them to understand, because they it is the worst way to comfort is to say move on. There is no such thing as moving on. This phrase is told by those who are too uncomfortable with death, sadness, and grief. Those who encounter tragedies move forward with their pain. They can make it a legacy and a support for others if they want to do that. I would give you a few examples of how people could make their pain a legacy. Ethan, he was diagnosed with congenital heart disease. They call it a CHD. He lived just 7 years of life, and he underwent many cardiac surgeries during his lifetime. When Ethan died at 7 years, his parents, Jessica and Eric, took their love for him and created a foundation called the Ethan M. Lindbergh Foundation. That foundation offers grants, housing, support, and even music therapy to families living with such heart disease. They did not move on with their pain, but they created a legacy, and countless families and people are now supported. Another example, Philip Fernandez. He was a wonderful husband and a wonderful father. He was hit by a car while cycling, and at a young age, his wife Michelle lost him. She did not know what to do and could not find any support in the community that she desperately needed. So, you know what she did? She created herself something. It's called Soaring Spirits International, a non-profit that connects widowed people worldwide. Camp Widow, it offers 3-day workshops, presentations, social gatherings, and many, around 3 million widowed people have been helped by this foundation worldwide. Another, our own example, Karibiran Parameshwaran. He was playing with his sons and daughters on the beach by their house in India when the tsunami struck him. And the tsunami took with it his 3 children, Rakshanya, 12, Karunya, 9, and 5-year-old Kirubasan, and 7 of his relatives. They all came to his house to celebrate Christmas. And they went to see to play, and they never came back. Grief-stricken Parameshwaran realized that only he can forget that by helping those orphaned by the killer wave. And he tells the story how throwing open the door of his house had given him and his wife a reason to live. Though he finds it difficult to smile on that day, he says that a day can never forget, but he found a reason to live. Even Helen Keller was just 19 months when she lost her sight and hearing, but she learned Braille and became the first deaf and blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. Later, she changed the societal perspective of differently able people. They can be treated like normal people. They also can have dreams and goals. And she helped tons of handicapped people who were blind and deaf and showed them that they can make a difference in their own lives and also in the lives of others. And I love one particular foundation called One Love Foundation. One Love Foundation exists for one reason. Sharon Love, the mother, never knew about relationship abuse, and that could be so dangerous. Her daughter, Yardley Love, was just a 22-year-old girl, and she was so beautiful. And she was a student at the Virginia University, and she was a lacrosse player. And she was dating a man, George, for 2 years. And often they used to be seen together. But he was a little aggressive, and he used to take alcohol. And one day he was seen hitting a teammate for becoming closer to her. And one day they found that she was killed by him. And so the mother thought, okay, let me educate all the parents about healthy relationship and a non-healthy relationship. How can you identify an abusive person? And how can you protect yourself and your children's life? And so she started the One Love Foundation. They give regular talks, and they help a lot of people who are going through and who had gone through abuse. So many people have used their pains and tragedies for a higher purpose. Many say, let go of your pain, but letting go is not that easy. Somebody was telling a story, I was just listening. She was telling a professor was holding a bottle of water and asked his students, what will happen if I hold it for 1 hour? It will pain. If it is for 12 hours, 24 hours, it will pain a lot. So better let me drop it. So that is the way pain, when you hold on to it, it pains. What he was telling is true. But dropping it is not that easy. You know, if another example, a person was telling, if you hold a coin close to your eyes, it will stop everything. It will stop the sunlight even. So better remove the coin. But removing the coin, what you're holding it, it's so difficult. It's not that easy because it's not possible by our own power. You need a higher power. You need a supernatural power against the backdrop of your greatest pain. You know that supernatural power, God can supply all your needs. He's too big. If he has created the universe and holding each and every design in his hands, he's bigger than the pains of your life. He's bigger than the storms of your life. And he can do much greater thing. You know, why I could say is I struggled around some 2 to 3 decades back a lot. I was walking on eggshells. I was feeling undeserved tragedy, undeserved pain every day of my life. And I was praying that this pain to be removed for 20 long years. I was struggling terribly, and I was bitter and angry on God. I felt, if you're God, why didn't you come to my rescue? And I tried to take my life. I was doing my PhD in IASC. That time I got a terrible fever. I never took care. It ended up in pneumonia. I was admitted in Malaya Hospital, and they had to put me on ventilator because when it was a massive pneumonia and my both lungs had gone. So at that time, when I was on the ventilator, I was thinking I'm the best person. God revealed every mistake I have done like a movie, and the blood of the cross came and covered my sins. I heard a voice, I'm giving you a new life. And then I came out, something told me to read the Bible, and that changed my life. You know, I afterwards I started to understand about the universe and the fine tuning and the design behind it. I understood that even my life would have been designed. Even there could have been a purpose behind my pain. Even there should be some purpose. So I understood I am a beautiful masterpiece, wonderfully designed by the wise God, made in the image of God, fearfully and wonderfully. You know, if you're going through pain, knowing that you're fearfully and wonderfully made makes a difference. So it's better to submit, and God can turn the most horrible things as the best thing. The crucifixion is one of the most horrible things, but God used it to open up the heavens to his followers. The same way God can allow pain and suffering to do a greater good. Even in nature, you can see. You know, in California, there is a pine called lodgepole pine that grows in numbers. The cones will not open unless it undergoes a terrible heat. You know, that particular area goes through often forest fire. Every tree dies off. And this seeds that falls down because of the heat of the fire, after some time, takes up root, and then it becomes big, beautiful trees. The same forest fire that destroyed the pine tree also helped in opening the cone, paving the way for its later renewal. Yes, there is a rainbow after every storm. But it is so difficult when we are going through storm. We are not supposed to tell them, you will come out of it or you will see a rainbow. Just let us stand close to them. Have no way of knowing what loss you have suffered, what tragedy you have suffered. You might tell I'm fine, but deep within you might not be fine. But better speak to someone. Reach out to someone, don't quit. And even you can speak to God. He is a God who listens. Sometimes when you go through pain and you're so beautifully going through pain joyfully, you can live a sermon. There are many false preachers who preach falsely. They don't live that. But when you go through pain, even without a word, you will look so beautiful to the world. Every bit of your life is beautiful. That's why I wanted to say recently when I underwent a COVID experience, I wanted to tell that one and finish it. When I got this COVID 3 months back, my both sons are in the US. So I had to be alone. I had to face it alone. And recently I saw many, I was telling the story of my friend's husband and one of my friend's sister. Some people died within 2 days. Some people died after 15 days or 1 month. So I am hearing the news of this death everywhere. And so I had to go to the hospital alone, drive alone. And I just had only one friend, that was Jesus. So I asked him, why don't you drive my car and sit with me and let us go and come back together? So I drove the car and then I had to do all the tests. And finally, I was so happy to learn that I can stay at home and take the home quarantine, that all the medicines. And so I came back home. One thing I understood, that I have to keep my mobile outside, no other news from outside. It was so terrifying for me to read everything. And finally, I was trying to enjoy. If I live in this world, I had to be with God. If I go away from this world, I will be with God. So let me remain with that one person who is permanent. And you know, when you don't have fear, you will breathe properly. That helped me to breathe well. That helped me when I was doing all the breathing exercises. It helped me. And God beautifully enabled me to come out of that COVID. So what I wanted to say is all of us might be going through tragedies, but you are never alone. You are never alone. There are people to reach out to people. When I was alone in COVID, I used to often ask God, God, I'm feeling alone. But I used to hear a voice within me that you are not alone, I'm with you. So that voice within me helped me. So many of us will have great friends. And so we can reach out to friends. Never quit, my dear friend. When you are undergoing such tragedy, there are really great people of God. And there are really lovely people, even if they don't believe in God. There are many lovely people. Just reach out to them. Bring your fears, bring your tears, and don't keep it in your heart. You know, that is very, very important. Reaching out to the world and reaching out to a supernatural power is so important. So with this, I just would encourage each and every one of you that this is not the end. There is a hope available, and that is hope. Don't give up. Thank you.